Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Donohoe here, news editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. With low prices for many farmers and some banks moving to sell off their riskier loans, we're providing continuing coverage on the financial situation across the industry. The Irish Farmers Journal digital editor Thomas Hubert sat down with our agribusiness editor Eoin Lowry and farm finance specialist Peter Young for a financial health check of agriculture before the busiest time of the year really kicks off.
Owen, maybe I'll go to you first. Are there any signs that the low prices and the difficulties we've heard from farmers in a number of sectors are translating into a general credit crunch or financial difficulties in the farming sector?
Well, Thomas, I suppose there's no doubt that farmers are going to be under more pressure this year than they have been or have seen for the last number of years. Whether we see that right now, it's difficult to see, I suppose, because we're only starting into the season where in the tillage side farmers are just beginning to sow and take out the credit facilities from their merchants, and then the dairy side or the beef side hasn't really kicked off yet for the season. It's early days. However, all indications would show that farm incomes are going to come under much more pressure this year, which in turn would mean that farm finances and debt repayment capacity, if they're highly borrowed, will come under significant pressure also.
We had a story last week about contractors beginning to feel the pinch. They might be the first in the chain. Peter, are you seeing anything yet at farm level, contractors, farmers themselves? How are our figures looking at the moment?
Yeah, I think there is individual contractors, there is individual farmers, but it's not widespread yet. I mean, I've talked to a lot of merchants this week, a lot of banks this week. The banks aren't seeing an increase in overdrafts or in current accounts, a reduction in current accounts yet. The merchants, they're giving a lot of credit out since the dry weather's come, a lot of fertiliser going out. They're saying it's not more than normal. So I think by and large, no, we're not seeing that credit crunch come yet, but I think we will see it. I mean, okay, dairy farmers, they ended last year in a good position, but and they actually supplied more milk. They might have got a lower price, but they supplied more milk in February and they will do in March. So they're actually getting more money from the co-ops. And talking to some of the co-ops, that's coming through. But it will be in May and June that we really will. They expect bigger checks. They won't get them. That we will see the bills starting to bite. They'll have made repayments, and that's when I think contractors, will get more difficulty getting paid. Same for the tillage guys. I mean, really, they've come off the back of 2 bad years, and really a lot of them are planting in hope that price will go up to make a profit. But if it doesn't, I mean, they will struggle, but that'll be closer to the back end because they're going to use more and more merchant credit.
Okay. Now, Owen, how are the banks themselves, considering their position at the moment? We've heard stories about vulture funds coming in, things like that. So what's the reality behind that?
Well, Thomas, I think first of all we need to take a step back and look at the industry and the financial sector as a whole, and to see what levels of finance have been flowing into the sector over the last number of years. And what can be seen is that, I suppose, Irish debt levels on Irish farms peaked in 2008 at about 5 billion euros. Since then, it has fallen back to about 3 billion euros of debt outstanding on Irish farms. So it has come down significantly over the last number of years. And why this has happened is because in the good times, traditionally farmers pay back debt, and over the last number of years they've had that money in cash available to themselves to pay it down, which has been great. But again, in times when incomes or prices come under pressure, this is when they needed support of banks even more, so that they can manage through the low times of these volatile times that we live in today, and to get through the bad times in hope of better times in the future. So what I suppose what we've been seeing, particularly with some of the banks, especially Ulster Bank in the last number of weeks, is where they've had legacy debt issues, and we've had a number of phone calls into the Farmers Journal from concerned customers who find themselves in a position where they're being asked to refinance or repay loans that may end up in a proposed loan sale to these vulture funds, as you suggest. And I suppose their biggest concern is, well, what do we do in this scenario? And Peter Young goes into this in very great detail of the options that are available to farmers in this situation, this week's journal.
Well, the first thing, I mean, for the majority, it shouldn't come out of the blue. I mean, in 75 of these cases, Ulster Bank have said that, they have been in arrears in 5 years or more. So the first thing is you have to engage. I mean, there's no point ignoring it. That's the worst thing you can do. You have to communicate right back to them. I think you should go get advice from your accountant and make sure your accountant has experience. And most accountants do have experience, particularly with dealing with banks. I think when you're dealing with, I suppose, the vulture funds, and you won't be dealing directly with them. And some farmers' loans, I mean, Ulster Bank did sell more loans back in October, and there is also already some farmers who are further down the path and actually are dealing with the credit servicing companies, which actually are the intermediary between the vulture funds and farmers. And I mean, I've talked to a number of negotiators or people who are negotiating on farmers' behalves in this week's journal, and I mean, it is a difficult negotiation. But I mean, the first thing is, is communicate, make sure you keep paying repayments. So some advice being given initially was that, if you don't pay repayments, it'll be easier to get a write down. I mean, that will work against you, particularly if you go to look for other banks to refinance. And some farmers are having success going to Bank of Ireland, going to AIB to get loans to actually repay the poor loans or the poorly performing loans. Now, these existing banks will look at repayment capacity. They will establish how much they will lend you based on your repayment capacity and based on your track record as well. So if you're being seen to keep making repayments, that'll help you.
So as you said, this doesn't come out of the blue. Those loans that are proposed for sale are usually the poorly performing ones, the ones that are already in arrears. If you've been repaying regularly, you shouldn't expect your loan to be transferred to a vulture fund. Is that right?
No, and I mean, in the case of Ulster Bank, I mean, we have some farmers who have come forward and been surprised that they've been called. In some cases, maybe they have been arrears a few years ago, but they've got back up and they thought, listen, I'm making repayments now. And I suppose the first point for that is if they think they shouldn't be in there, and Ulster Bank have said this, well then communicate with them and they will look at your case. And if they made a mistake, and they could make a mistake, well then they could say, sorry about that, and sorry for the stress. I'm not sure they'll pay you or give you any money for that, but I mean, they will take you out of that situation. But for anyone who is in the situation, they have to engage in the bank. They can repay, they can look to other banks. But I mean, even if they are sold to vulture funds, I suppose the point to make is it's not the end of the road. You don't fall off a cliff. It just becomes a different conversation with a different person, and there is outcomes in that as well. And I think it's important to point out, the effect of stress, because a lot of the farmers, and particularly farmers I've talked to who rang in the journal, I mean, they are worried. They're trying to run a business, and if they're stressed, particularly it's a very busy time of the year, calving, lambing, tillage, and sometimes the farm suffers as well. So it's to deal with that stress as well, get the whole family involved and talk to people as well, talk to people who've gone through and talk to your advisors. And I think that's an important point, because I mean, we all know if a farmer holds it together, doesn't talk about it, there can be worse consequences than money and loans and losing land.
Okay, Peter, thanks very much. You have details in this week's Farmers Journal about these kind of situations. Eoin as well, you're reporting on how the banks are behaving and the negotiations with farmers on those issues, all in the Farmers Journal this week at farmersjournal.ie, and we will continue to cover this issue in the weeks to come. Thanks very much.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Eoin, the home of Irish dairy.
Bad news for young people getting ready to start farming. It is now clear that there is virtually no funding available for the National Reserve this year. News correspondent Odile Evans has a story in this week's Irish Farmers Journal, and she got more details from Macra Firma's Agricultural Affairs Manager, Derrie Dillon.
We had a meeting with Bernie Brennan from the National Reserve last week to get an indication how the 2016 National Reserve was progressing. And she outlined to us that there was a higher demand for the 2015 National Reserve than expected. There was a higher area of entitlements required from young farmers. And as a result, the funds available for the 2016 National Reserve is rather limited. And the demand from young farmers is still out there for a reserve, because if a young farmer is starting up and they have no availability of entitlements on land, they have no other option unless to buy entitlements, which is prohibitive for a lot of young farmers because of cash flow difficulties of starting up, of low commodity prices, and this is their main mechanism to be able to be installed in agriculture, and we expected to have a national reserve from 2015 to 2020.
Yeah, and I suppose like last year there was a lot of the funds were used up, which is the key issue. And how do you propose that we could create a fund again for 2016?
Well, we've looked at a few different possibilities, and one is a reallocation of funds to the National Reserve. We'll see that there'll probably be some unused entitlements from the Young Farmer top-up, and also that the National Reserve is a key policy tool for young farmers. So some funding may have to be reallocated into the National Reserve.
Where would the funding come from beyond the unused entitlements this year?
The Department have proposed a number of things, mechanisms. They have a clawback on the sale of entitlements. However, unfortunately, this is unlikely to deliver any significant amount of funds. And the other option, which is a linear cut, and that's a ministerial decision on the total fund of basic payment ceiling, and allocate a proportion of that to the National Reserve to ensure that you create an adequate fund for future provision. This wouldn't require any major significant percentage or anything like that, but it is a ministerial decision to make a linear cut.
Okay, and so going forward, how does Macra hope to achieve that?
We've requested a meeting with the Minister. As I say, we've had talks with Bernie Breen in the department last week, and we hope to get this meeting with the Minister and to emphasise to him the importance of a National Reserve and about the reallocation of funds for this National Reserve, because at the end of the day it's a ministerial decision around the National Reserve, and we have to convince the Minister of the need to have a National Reserve, because if we have a stop-start mechanism on schemes, we know the history of a stop-start mechanism. You open a scheme, you close a scheme, and then you have young farmers who fall out of the criteria in the eligibility. And we have another group of farmers, and we're always going back looking at trying to sort out farmers who fall between the stools in schemes. And now, if we've learned anything from the past, that is, do not close the National Reserve this year, because otherwise you're stacking up problems for the future again.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Derrie. And the details are on page 3 of the Farmers' Journal this week.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers' Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Last weekend marked 20 years since BSE turned into an international health crisis that brought the beef industry to its knees. In Tipperary, our digital editor Thomas Hubert met two farmers who have moved on from the shock depopulation 20 years ago, Mary and John Breen.
We actually used to call her the mad cow because she was always very nervous, and a cow who you'd always have to be watching her because she would kick you. And then in early November, she fell coming into the milking parlour one morning. Monday morning came and the department arrived out, and from there on then, like, it was in their hands, and they just came every day for 2 days, and then on the third day, which was the Wednesday, they'd been watching her and they said that was the day she was being put down. And she was put down that day, and she was buried on the farm out there, and with lime and everything like that down top for a big deep hole, I remember well. And then maybe a week after that then, or maybe 8 days afterwards, we got the results back saying she was a positive.
They come, they do the valuation, they don't tell you what they're giving you. They talk about 112 odd cattle to do. So they go away that day, they come back that evening with the valuation, literally leave it on the table to you, and you go through it and they tell you to contact them when you want them to come back, or you agree or do not agree with the valuation. They expect that you agree with the valuation. We didn't agree with the valuation. We thought they were very, very much undervalued at the time. It felt at the time as if the valuers didn't really know what they were doing. We certainly didn't know what we were doing. We were learning as we went along. Looking back on it now, the department has said we're learning as they went along. And there was no set way of dealing with this.
Some people felt so isolated and traumatised by the whole thing, really, because at the end of the day, you know, when you lose a herd of cows, it's like they're like family to you, because you're with them every day of the week. You know every move they make, you know everything they can do, and you know if this is a calf out of that cow over there. You, like with us, we got even wedding presents of 1 or 2 cows as heifers, and I said, you know, that family is gone then. So it's nearly like a member of your family when you lose your cows, and that's what the size of it. The talking to people helped an awful lot of people. definitely helped an awful lot of people. And it also helped the department, the fact that the people got together. Because, we were all in a situation where we didn't know, we were like headless chickens really running around. We didn't know where we were going to turn to next. We didn't know what was going to happen. And that was the biggest fear, this big black hole that was in front of us.
We keep a lot more cattle with. So we were leasing maybe 100 acres of land. We're leasing 200 acres of land now. So it didn't hamper us farming. You have to put it behind you at some stage and move on, and make a living out of it. And thankfully, we have done reasonably well of it.
And you can watch the full video of the interview with Mary and John as part of our special online feature looking back on those troubled times at farmersjournal.ie.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
This week, we continue to explore locally led agro-environmental schemes and the pioneering work of the Burns farmers under this new system. Odile Evans met with one of them, Michael John Maroney.
Before I had been in reps, what it meant was that you could only put up the cattle in the winter time, so in October, and you had to be gone out of it for May. But now you can summer graze and it's not as strong and it's easier to eat the winterage. Before it was gone wild, you could say. We'll say 10, 12 miles away from the winterage. So you couldn't just open the gate and walk up, so you had to bring them up in a lorry. So you got an exemption in maybe of 1 week to graze it, but 1 week wasn't 100 acres, you couldn't graze it 1 week.
Tell us, what was the logic behind not being
Well, you see, I suppose the National Parks and Wildlife, because it was NHA, thought that cattle be left on it because it was winterage. There are different styles of winterage. You have heavy grass and you have lower winterage in it has very short grass, and that'll last all summer and all winter. But the heavier stuff, you don't graze it off, it'll get stronger and it'll fall over, and it's next to impossible to graze it in. So that has to be topped off in the summertime. And that's what this Newborn Life project saw, that, I put in water trucks and they were 50% funded, which I thought was great because I had to put them in myself. Money has to come out of your pocket anyway.
And tell us, what for you is the biggest incentive to take part in this programme?
Well, it's to open up the places so that the cattle can actually get in. And you can put in your gate so that you've access. The cattle can move from this field to here. If before, literally now in that farm, because it's NHA land, to do any of those actions, you had to go to the OPW and they had to come out and they had to look at it. This way, you have a body that are recognised. Brendan Dunford and his team are recognised. That they'll look at it and they'll say, yeah, well, you'll be allowed to do that, and we'll show it to them and they'll accept it. Yeah. But me going and saying maybe, I want to take out all this here, and they said, no, that's not going to work. So you don't do it so you don't. Yeah. And if you start right and do the job right, you'll get to do the work away,
And so that's more the kind of the works end of it, and then there's also the results base when they.
Well, the results base is, you see, you're paid. The purpose of doing this work, number one, is to put a water truck here. The advantage in it, we'd say when we started here. 95, we had water here in this source here, and it was a pond really, and you had to drive the cattle from here, and you had to drive them up every 2 or 3 days and put them in there to the water, and you had to drive them back down again. So it meant that you had only all one field, and now we have 5 fields.
There's a lot of work in driving them up the whole time.
There is, and if you start feeding them meal, you can't not give them water. So now it's like a summer farm for the world. You have water in trucks, so you can close your gate, you put in so many cattle here, and they have water. You give them some meal. It's easy, manage it now, and you have your walls done, and you have it maintained, better than just one time of winter. It was they drove in 30 bullocks, and you walked up and you looked at them maybe twice a week, and that was it. Now you can feed more, and you can manage them. That system is gone because cattle can't be 3, 4, 5-year-old bullocks. That can't happen anymore. You have to be finished now. Cattle have to be finished younger, and that aged thing that was there 30 years ago, aged cattle like.
So you're not putting suckler cows up there, you're putting
yearlings and year and a half.
Yeah. And you sell them on then.
Yeah, they come back to grass then, or they're sold on to finishers then.
Yeah.
So it's.
And do you find you get a premium for that, or is it just
I suppose you don't. You sell them in the market. You probably don't get the premium. You will get potential lads that will buy them because of the fact that they're limestone. And that's about it, But I suppose to get that they're actually born beef, there isn't really a premium there on that. Yeah. But the premium is there you could say, out of the grazing of the better I graze these down, the better my scores come up in the scheme, so that the more they pay me per hectare.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
The Balmoral Show is the largest agricultural event in Northern Ireland, and it will take place between the 11th and 13th of May. Our Northern correspondent, Peter McCann, asked Rona Geary of the Royal Ulster Agricultural Society what they are planning for this year.
Well, 7 weeks and counting, and we're busy getting ready, getting the grounds here at Balmoral Park prepared for the show. The show's about 10% bigger. We've moved the show out slightly. We have about 30 or 40 new trade stands have been on our waiting list to get in, so they're in this year. We've the Icon Exhibition Centre, which we're in here today, on site this year, and we've over 180 trade stands in here, a bit like the shopping village, just you can buy a bit of everything in this area. But really good competition. The entries closed last week, and we're still counting up the entries, but we know we're going to be filled the rafters with livestock.
As far as the show going forward, even in coming years, it's been talked about maybe extending it to a 4-day event, and the same as the Winter Fair. Has that been discussed?
Yeah, well, we're still looking at that at the minute. We're doing a wee bit of research into a 4-day show. We'll hopefully know what the finals and that'll be in the next lot of weeks, and we'd like to maybe be announcing that before this year's event.
And finally, the side traffic and things, an issue in the past. How are you coping this year with cars coming on and off the new site here at the Maze?
Yeah, we do have a full traffic management plan, and we tweak that every year. Obviously, whenever you have a very minor road infrastructure around the site here, we just have to manage that the best we can. Encourage a lot of people to come by public transport and maybe get the shuttle bus from Lisburn station after they go off the train. It brings them straight to the door. But we have 11,000 car parking spaces here on site, so people can get parked very close. And it's like any large event in Northern Ireland. Unfortunately, there are going to be slight delays getting in and getting out, but it's part of the experience, and once the people are here, they'll have a really good day out.
And I also suppose now is the perfect time to plug the Irish Farmers Journal app.
Absolutely.
You can locate where your car is, and also all the news and what's going on in the show over the 3 days. Rhonda, thanks very much for your time, and looking forward to the show.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
The winners of the Angus Calf Rearing competition were announced last week, and Odile Evans met the winners from the Sacred Heart Secondary School in Clonakilty, County Cork.
Obviously you're the first ones to win, so not all at once, but how do you feel?
Over the moon. Honoured. Yeah. Honoured. Yeah. Such a wonderful competition to be crowned the winners, and taking time to sink in.
But even, as you said, the first year, it's such an honour to be crowned the very first winners. Not saying put your heads huge, but people will probably look up to us now with other groups come into it.
Well, I mean, all 5 groups here now have set the benchmark for schools going forward. So what tips would you give them?
Facts. Paul Matthews, one of the judges, it was his life throughout the whole thing. He just said facts.
Yeah. So what was your actual project based on then? Just tell us a little bit about that.
So we were given the theme of sustainability. Being from West Cork, we have an abundance of grass, so we said we would use this to our advantage. With the Gulf Stream coming up, the grass growth in West Cork is, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ahead of that in the Midlands. So we used that to our advantage, and we outwintered our animals on kale. And then on the 7th of February, 3 weeks earlier than the calves in the Midlands, our calves went out to grass. Our calves only spent 1 night indoors, and that was the night before they were slaughtered. So a grass-based system, we have proved, definitely works.
How long did it take you to put together a project like that?
We've been working on it from the start, really. Advice to new groups as well is just keep a memory stick and just keep doing a bit maybe every 2 weeks, and just keep it going. It made our lives so much easier at the end to formulate a project, so definitely keep on top of it.
And you also had to do a bit of work then on promoting Angus beef to both farmers and consumers, am I right?
Yeah.
So maybe you could tell me a bit about what you did there.
Well, first of all, we had a calf naming ceremony, and we invited all the community, and we blessed our calves and we named them, and that was a great event. And then we just travelled around to local shows.
On our Facebook page, we got the highest amount of likes out of the 5 groups on our Facebook page, so last night I think we had something like 120 best wishes. We got over 1,080 likes, so really Facebook.
But even the community were behind us the whole way, like the support we got from the school, even walking up through the main street trying to people like, oh, you're an Angus girl, tell us about the project.
Everybody
knew about it, everybody.
They're like, I've seen you on the paper for something, are you one of the Angus girls?
Friends and family have been huge as well. Our parents and our siblings have been an absolute amazing support for us. I don't think we could have done it without them, and especially our school, Anne-Marie Brosnan, Brendan Walsh, and of course Bree Tennessee. She has been like a second mother to all of us. She's been absolutely amazing, and I couldn't have done it without her.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, brilliant.
Congratulations.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Finally, Isabel Hurley and Ciara Leahy tell us about the 28-page horse sport breeding supplement included in this week's Irish Country Living.
First of all, it's a 28-page guide. It's the annual breeding guide that Joanne Fox and her team bring out every year. It's like the industry Bible for sport horse breeding in Ireland, and it has always found its natural home in the Farmers Journal and the Irish Country Living magazine. So it's out this Thursday, and it's a must-read for breeders, owners, producers, vendors, pinhookers and buyers alike. It aims to give the reader, both professional and non-professional, a comprehensive picture of the Irish sport horse breeding scene, both here at home in Ireland, as well as the international flavour of what has now become a truly global industry.
So Isabel, as you say, this comes out every year. What are the real stories this year that are going to catch people's attention?
Well, I think, Ciara, what's certainly going to catch people's attention this year is our veterinary article from UCD expert Sunita Dewan. And Sunita has brought all the advancements on the veterinary reproduction forefront to the readers' minds. She's talking about embryo transfer, the latest techniques for sexing of foals, and really it shows how this industry has gone all the way from the natural cover to AI and beyond into cloning and really advanced technologies.
That's information that people can't get anywhere else. What else is in the breeding supplement?
Well, we talked to many of the breeders around Ireland, Alan Robinson of Robertson Equine, Emma Rose Conroy of Euro Stallions, the renowned breeders Edward Doyle, showjumper and producer and breeder of Ireland's top-ranked showjumper in Flexible, as well as Dr. Noel Cawley, who many of the readers and listeners would know is one of Ireland's most preeminent sport horse breeders.
As an industry, what is the equine sector worth to the Irish economy each year?
Not many people know this, Ciara, but the actual sport horse sector is worth over 700 million to the Irish economy every year. Right. It's actually worth twice as much as the sheep sector, which comes in about 300 million. There are approximately 124,000 horses and ponies in Ireland. Ireland as a nation is the most densely populated sport horse country in the whole of Europe.
It was traditionally seen as a bit of a poor relation compared to other sectors of the economy, but I suppose with those figures you're really proving that that isn't so. And is it changing even more?
Yes, in fact it is, and as late as the last budget day, Agriculture Minister Simon Coveney said that with figures like that the sport horse industry is no longer something to be sneezed at, in his own words. And it's an industry that I'd like to remind everyone employs over 12,000 people full-time and has the potential to employ far more on a part-time basis.
Isabel, as you were saying there earlier, this breeding supplement is relevant to so many readers. Obviously with the veterinary article, that really applies to those that are deep in the sector. What about people that are thinking about getting involved in it more?
Well, certainly the guide for those type of people, Ciara, there a very good overview of the costs involved of getting it. We have Chagas have done the costs of production from buying a foal and bringing a foal from its early months of life into a year stage, the cost of production from a yearling to a 3-year-old, from a 3-year-old to a 6-year-old, and then on up the ranks. And the costs really mount up if you have an animal that is well capable of jumping a 130, 140 course. To produce that animal further and internationally, the costs are all done out in each tables, and the tables are actually an invaluable guide to give people an idea of what's involved. But at the same time, we wouldn't like to put people off, because there's a level for every sector in this market, from the Connemara pony enthusiast right up to the very sophisticated sport horse breeder using the latest veterinary technologies. This is an industry that can cope with everyone's, whatever background or however deep your pockets are or not. There is a level and a sector in it for everybody, and that's particularly why there is such a love and passion for the Irish sport horse as well as being a truly extraordinary athlete known throughout the world for soundness of both body, mind and bone. It is an industry that can literally cope with everyone from the leisure pleasure happy hackers right up to the very sophisticated breeders who would be breeding and aiming their top animals at the global market.
What is it about the Irish horse that makes it so sought after by buyer producers across the world, not just here in Ireland?
Well, across the world, people come to the sport horse sales here in Cavan and Goresbridge every year, and they're all looking for the next Dougie Douglas, who topped the sales last year at €1.4 million in Goresbridge, an Irish bred horse who had done it all throughout his career, produced in Great Britain by Holly Gillett, who jumped him throughout his career, and he went all the way to the Nations Cup, winning Grand Prix events all over the world for her and his then owner Graham Smith. They sold him last year at Goresbridge for a record-breaking $1.4 million. He was bought by the American rider Katie Deenan, who has already won a major competition in his new home in America with him. So that is kind of like what everyone is aiming for, the next Dougie Douglas. It's really the stuff of dreams for the people involved, but it shows that it can be done. But both Martin Donoghue from Goresbridge and Stuart Clark from Cavan Sales will tell you that their phone rings constantly from people from the UK, from Britain, from France, from Sweden, from Germany, and they're all looking for a good Irish bred horse, and for the right horse that has been produced right and is a performer. Really, the sky is the limit in terms of the money.
From happy hackers to Dougie Douglas, I think that there's so much covered in our 28-page breeding supplement in this week's Irish Country Living. Thanks very much, Isabel.
Thank you, Ciara.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Or Newer, the home of Irish dairy.